Good afternoon, and I want to welcome you to Lunch with Jerry and Cheryl here on a Friday afternoon. This is our weekly broadcast, and today we're going to talk about something that can really make exceptional sales, exceptional progress as a human being, and can benefit you and your team members immensely. If you looked at the teasers I put out on today's show, I talked about how a certain gentleman has been so successful. And we're going to talk about that so you can take what he's using and put to work for you. So stick around with us. We're going to get started here in just a minute with today's episode. Talk to you shortly. So, welcome back with us. Like I put out in the teasers that some of you may have seen, we're going to talk about how technicians are excelling at sales. They're just excelling. When you look at it and you have service technicians that are producing multi-million dollars in sales a year, there is a secret sauce that these people use. And we're going to share with you today the secret sauce of success that you can put to work for you. Cheryl, what else would you say about today's topic before we actually get into the meat of this broadcast?
I think it's going to be a really interesting topic. Is it directed towards sales? Yes. But I think just for the general public, I think they're going to be able to learn a lot. And we do have a giveaway that we're doing on this one.
Right. So stick with us because we are going to have a real significant giveaway in this. And it's going to be based on the people that like today's show. And it's also going to be the people that say, hey, I want to be on that list to get this free giveaway. So stick around with us. We'll talk about the giveaway in just a little bit. But if we tell you right now, it will kind of spoil the subject matter that we're going to be talking about today. Good afternoon, Lee. Appreciate you joining us today. And I think this is going to be right up your alley of things that we have talked about a lot in our conversations. So what are we talking about here? What are we talking about? The ways that people get to these astronomical levels in sales. And to do this, we're going to talk about the secret sauce that we use. Now, like I said, I'm in a very unique situation because I actually get to see sales reports. So it's not made up. It's not somebody's wishy-washy. This is actually looking at the tracked and measured sales by these individuals. And how did they do that? I actually have conversations and interviewed people to say, okay, tell me this. What's your secret sauce? And here's what it is. The people that are excelling have the unique ability to listen, and from listening, they're able to gauge their presentation to the people that they are selling their product to. Now, this is actually called understanding people's DISC behavior. They're actually behavior patterns. And Cheryl here is a certified DISC assessor. So Cheryl, let's talk a little bit about what DISC is and what do you do when you assess someone's DISC?
Well, first of all, it is a behavioral assessment. I do not use it to hire people with. I use it in drawing my conclusions. What it does, it's divided into four sections of the DISC, the DISC. You also have other sections. You're not one or the other. You are a Duke's mixture of a lot of things. We are born one way and we will basically stay that way our entire life. Our core is our core. Now, something catastrophic happened, like a head injury, things may change, but other than that, you are your core. And the bad part or the good part about it is if you get scared or angry, you're coming back to your core, no matter how much you've altered it. And the good thing is we can alter our appearances in the core, since because you and I, we are both 99Ds, which makes us very dominant, demanding, and we talk really fast, but we both have had to slow our speech down, and we'll get more into that later. But how do you want me to go on any farther, Jerry? Do you have any questions you want to ask at this point?
Yeah, I've got some questions I want to put up. So the DISC is spelled DIS and C. So what you're saying is everyone has probably they're going to have two high points, such as a high D and I or a high S and C. So let's start out. And if you're watching this, I would take a piece of paper and write down and take some notes in this because it'll really help you. So Cheryl, let's start out by what is the percentage of the population that is a D, an I, an S, and a C?
Well, God was really good to the earth when he only put 3% of high D's out here. And you're looking at two of them, which narrows down a lot. The I percentage is like 11. The S is 69 and the C's are 17. So as you see, the S and C are the predominant across actually the world. I started to say the United States, but this test is used worldwide.
Yeah. So the D, the I, the S, and the C, what do each of those letters signify that personality as being?
Okay, the D basically is fast decision making. It's the dominant. It's a person that really does not like to be micromanaged. They want control. The I, they're very talkative people. If you've got a CSR, you want her fairly high on the I scale, but not so high that she's like the lady in the grocery store that's raving and rallying and talking. You want them to be able to converse. As you move up farther, you get the S. That's your stability or your speed. And I don't mean by how fast you work. That is the speed with how you process things. Do you think things through or do you just jump to conclusions? A high S is going to think through a problem, where a lower S will, as you and I both do, we fly by the seat of our pants. So that's one trait of the S. The C's are your constant. They are your uh, perfectionists. A really, really high C is very book orientated. They're very analytical. They want everything perfect. They can't deal with mistakes. You call a lot that edit the books that we have, you call them the grammar police. They cannot stand to see anything imperfect. So that's just some of the traits, and they go on and on.
Okay. So Cheryl, one of the main points that we want to, excuse me, that we want to make today is it true that you've got to, for successful communication, have you got to communicate in a style that mates with that person's behavior patterns that you're actually speaking to?
You do. The thing is, most people assume, and especially an employer, assumes that their employee is the one that needs to change their situation when they're talking, but not so. The speaker needs to speak like the person wants to be heard. So if for you and I, if you're talking to me and you, we are more relative to bullet points. Boom, 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 tell me, get out of my way and let me go. As you go down the scale, that changes. And when you get to a C, they need to be spoken to much slower, not because they're slow, but because they're processing every word. You and I have a problem hearing every word. I use you and I because I know what we are. We tend to be selective listeners unless we're really paying attention to ourselves. So the thing about it is just you have to speak like they want to hear or they'll shut down.
Okay. So Cheryl, somebody just made a comment. Love being a double D. Is there such a thing as a double D?
Um, Not really. You're
Okay.
a D or you're an I or you're
Okay.
a C. You're
Yeah.
you can have two tops. If you're a high D, that's great. I'm a like again, we're both high Ds. Low Ds, and don't I want to get this through before we go any farther. Just because you're not high in something doesn't mean a lot. Let's face it, I had rather work with a very low D because I need someone to ground me. I really do. I like working with the other higher things. I need a person and do have a person in my office that's a very high S&C. But that's the person that gets things done that I think about. I have a hard time totally completing something without keeping my mind to it. I literally just, I can't do it. I will work. It takes me a long time to finish a project. I'll start 12 before I start finishing them up. But I do have a person in my office that will finish them, and they take my notes that make no sense to anyone but me, and they make them presentable to you.
Okay. So Cheryl, one of the secret sauces, one of those gold nuggets is being able to gauge very rapidly what the person's behavior pattern is that you are getting ready to speak to communicate an idea, to sell something to. Now, this initial conversation, it could happen any number of ways. It could happen in a telephone call. It could happen from an email. It could be face-to-face meeting, or it could even be a text. So my first question here is this: how does a person quickly identify the behavior pattern of the person that they're speaking to? Because in order to build trust, in order to build a relationship, which is of utmost importance in the sales process, we've got to identify that person's behavior pattern, and that is one of the secrets. So how do they do that, Cheryl? How do you identify a person's behavior pattern with just a few words or just a simple meeting?
Okay, first of all, it's harder to tell on me because I've learned to do different things. But the normal person you meet, if they're talking very quickly at this stage and it's usually loud, their hands are fairly movable but not catastrophic. We point a lot. And a D will be usually moving one hand, but it's methodical. We talk again at a higher tone. We talk faster. I have had to slow down because I can't talk to an S&C at the speed that I do because they won't listen to me. Now, that's my first clue is there. Now, if you run into a person and they're talking like this with their hands moving around and it's very fast, and every other word is me, 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 usually they're a high I. And they're wanting attention. Someone, I would call them just an attention giver. That means they're very high on the I scale. There are reasons when you want a high I, and we'll get into that later. If you meet an S, they will have very minimal movements. They may do a few things with their hands, but it's very slow. Their voice is toned down quite a bit. It's much slower. The reason being they're thinking through their thoughts. They want everything that they say to come out perfectly or close to perfect. So you can kind of spot them. You know they're high on the S. If you get a C, if you have ever met anyone that's face never changes, when they smile, when you tell a joke, you don't really ever see a facial change. The people you ask all the time, are you okay? And their answer is, I'm fine. No movement. Very seldom will you ever see their hands move when they're talking. They're either folded in their lap or they have them behind their back. That's going to be your C. And that's the first trait of C. Now, that's when you have a person in front of you. Now, if you're on the phone, and this is where I think Jerry's wanting this to lead, is because a lot of the times you're having to sell over the phone. The only cues that you have over the phone is the height of their voice, how fast it is, and by how many questions they ask. If they ask minimal questions like I would do, basically, if you're wanting to sell me something, all I'm going to do is ask you, does it work? How much does it cost? And when can you put it in? Now, the farther you go down the scale to get to a C, they're going to ask you many, many questions, and you better give them the answers. because you're going to have to answer every one of their questions before they're going to purchase from you. Same way with text. Well, that was on the phone. Now let's go to. You want to go on to mail while I'm going?
Yes. Yeah, keep going to email because a lot of people, that's where the communication is going on in an email. And this is where also you've got to be able to gauge that behavior pattern. So let's go into email.
Email's about the same way as listening to somebody, because if you read like you're listening, you can pick it up very quickly. If they're saying a lot of me's, if they're saying instead of us, the S and C's are us people, the D and I's are I people. I need to get this done. I need to buy this, blah, blah, blah. And we type the same way that we talk. Now, there are a few of us that have really long emails, and Jerry is one of them. He has a long email, but as a rule, a D will bullet point their emails also. In fact, I've got a whole lot better. Mine used to be da da da, comma, da da da, comma, da da da, comma, da, and you had to figure it out from there. But if you are emailing someone that you are reading theirs, that's what you're going to read. Now, you need to respond basically in the same way. If you're going to respond to a D, you need to respond and put the most important stuff in the first line or two, or preferably put it in the header, because we are only going to read the first paragraph if you're lucky. We might skim the rest of it, but we won't catch it. So you want to put in all the stuff. The safe factor is to start with the important stuff and then put the fluff afterwards. Now, an S and a C are going to send long. The farther down, the more immaculate the email and the more questions it's going to be. You need to respond back like you got that email. If it's very technical, if it's very detailed, if it's very pointed, if every question's asked, you need to answer the same way, because if you miss a question, especially the C, is not going to qualify it as a full email till every question on there has been answered. So you can see it by the number of questions. That's the main thing in an email. Text the same way. If you get a long text, I mean, it's hard to do it now with the emojis and the little short forms that the kids use, but most D's are going to answer back in one word. Yes, no, maybe. Well, we have a hard time texting someone. I have a very high S in my shop, and when I get a text from her, it's 10 or 15 lines long. I can't do that, but that's how we differ just in text. But read the email like you're hearing the voice, and you can usually pick out the person. If they use a lot of exclamation points, they're an I. If they use a lot of question marks, they're a C.
Okay. So, like we talked about, part of this is today's subject matter dwells in several different areas, but one of them is how to get more sales, how to be more successful in sales, how to close more sales. So, here's the question. There's two general thought processes in a technician's sales process. And what we're talking about here is a technician that's gone to the house. It could be a chimney sweep. It could be an HVAC guy. It could be a plumber. It could be any of the trades. But one is to involve the customer in the process by saying, hey, I need you to come over here and look at this. And then a little bit later, hey, I need you to sit down and look at this. And throughout the visit, we continuously go to the consumer to give them the details. The other thought process of sales is to hold the information to the end and then do a sit down, what I would call sit down at the kitchen table, have the classic kitchen table discussion. Now, with those in mind, one I would call a bullet point explanation, and one is a much more involved, detail-oriented explanation. What personality style reacts the best, the most positive with the bullet point sales presentation, Cheryl?
Okay, so are you calling the second one the bullet point or the first one?
It could be whichever. The bullet point would be to me as a person that's going to sit down at the end of the service call and have the discussion with the customer here. And we're going to give the highlights of what we just saw.
And that's what you would want to do with a D and an I. With a D, definitely, and keep your bullet points short. Just tell us the dangers very quickly in a short version, and because you've only got our attention for a very, very short period of time, so tell me the most important stuff first. Then you can add the other stuff. If you see me starting to look up or look down, you better tie it up very quickly. So that can also be for an S and a C in a way, because then they can sit there. If you're willing to sit with them for a very long time and answer, you give them as much information as you can and then give them time and a lot of time to ask all the questions. I like that method more because I can deal with the person in the way they need to be dealt with. Now, should I go back to the other one and tell you where I see my faults?
Yes.
In the first one, where you kept bringing me over and sending me back and bringing me over and sending me back, about the third trip over, I would tell you to get it all together. A D is going to tell you to get it all together and then tell me about it. An S, a C especially would like that method because you're giving them the details and they feel like they're part of it. A D and I do not want to be part of it. They want to know the end, especially a D. On the other side, a S and a C wants to know every detail, plus details that you really don't have the answer to. So they both have their place, but the first one is very hard if you're working with a D, because they're going to shut you down and they're not going to care what you found. You'll talk yourself out of a job.
Okay. So the more detailed explanation, the more involvement with the person, the more of, let me show you the details, let me go in depth, let me really dig deep. That is fitting which behavior style, Cheryl?
The S and the C's more than the D and the I's.
Okay. So, and here's my next question. If you use the wrong communication style with the prospect, if you're using a communication style that may match your personality but not theirs, what's the end result of that, Cheryl?
You'll get shut down. For a D, if you're going on too long, you'll talk yourself right out of the cell. We will not. We won't wait for the answers. We'll just, you can stay here and talk to the wall. That's fine. On the other hand, if you're not answering all the questions for the S and the C's, they're going to feel like you don't care. They feel like they're not important to you. They're more the caring type personalities. They want to be cared for, and that's coming along. We see that more and more as the generations change. You've heard me give the percentages before, and as you've noticed, the S's have gone up considerable, but a lot of that is coming because of the younger generations. They are needing more attention. They're needing more accolades. They need a pat on the back more often. But that brings that brings it into the fact of they need the discussion, where a lot of us years ago were so used to just being handed orders and going and doing them.
Okay. So, next question for you. In order to effectively be able to understand the prospects, the person we're communicating with, to understand their behavior patterns, how important is it for us to understand our own behavior patterns to be successful in the communication process?
If you don't understand yours, you don't understand the differences whatsoever. You assume, and I use that word largely, you assume that everyone's just like you are. But as you learn your own, you will find that there's nuances in yours that are not in other people's standings. So without knowing yours, you don't know how to communicate. You know how to communicate with a person exactly like you, but you don't know how to communicate with another listening style, again, causing them to shut down.
Okay. So Cheryl, here's another question for you. Part of the process that you've been trained for and that you work with people is what is called the debriefing process. And this is after they have taken the DISC assessment, which can be quite a few pages and have a lot of information. So whenever you do a debriefing, would you explain what's involved in the debriefing process and why this is such a benefit to people?
Well, the way I like to start my debriefings, I want the person to have not read in depth, but looked over fairly well of their disc. And my first question is there anything you didn't understand? Because a lot of times you'll misinterpret things. And I want them to understand the things that they don't. And then you start comparing the things that are said in there to the way they feel. Is that the way you feel about yourself? Is that correct? And if it's correct, why is it? And especially if it's correct and it's not something that when they get the look on the face and says, that's some things I really don't like about myself. To me, then we work on that part to show them how to slightly change things and change the outlook of how people see, because the disc is a lot of times not what you see. It's what other people see in you. And you need to know that, because a lot of times you think you're doing fine, you're communicating fine, and then all of a sudden, let's say your wife, your employee, your child, they walk away from you. And you wonder what happened. And it was all about the fact you didn't understand how to speak with them. And that's about 90% of the disc. It's not all about communication, but everything you do is communication. Every movement you make, every facial expression that you make, every word that you say is a way of communication. And the biggest communication is what you don't say. And the disc will show you, and we will help you show you where you can improve certain areas that once you have knowledge, you're going to improve some just automatically. So it's just improving yourself. And that's what the debriefing is to do, to help you pinpoint the areas that you would like to work on. It's up to each individual whether they want to work on them or not.
Gotcha. So let's tell folks what the giveaway is today. Here's folks, here's the giveaway. And you got to do two things to get this. Number one, like this video. Just click on the like button and like our presentation today. Number two, if you look on the screen right now, you will see Cheryl's email address. It is Cheryl at cbcsuccessgroup.com, and Cheryl is spelled with an S. So all you got to do is like today's presentation and send an email to Cheryl so she'll know you really want this. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you a free DISC assessment where you're going to take a DISC, and Cheryl is going to give you a free debriefing call with this. She will take your DISC assessment, your behavior patterns, and she'll set up a call with you and go over and debrief the results to help you be able to put this behavior pattern information to use in yourself, in your professional life, and in your personal life. So it's a heck of a deal. Cheryl, what would be the value of that giveaway we're doing today? If you were doing this for someone that just contacted you, what would be the cost of this assessment and this debriefing call?
I've never charged this much, but I have other people in the same business that are doing it for $599.
Gotcha. So what it does, it helps you get there, and we're going to give you, if you're listening today, either on the live or on the replay, we're going to hold this for about a week. Cheryl, I'd like for you to make a decision, let's say by Wednesday, of the people you've heard from. It gives people a chance to watch the replay and throw their hat in the ring to get this out in the next, so we got to Wednesday. All you got to do is like the video and then send an email to Cheryl at cbcsuccessgroup.com. So Cheryl, let's go a little deeper with this process. Having a DISC assessment, and you do this for a lot of companies. What's the benefit in the workplace and to the teamwork of the company to know these DISC assessments of all the team members and where we understand the DISC, the behavior pattern of the coworkers and the members of the team. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, there's just a few things. It increases the employee's performance. They're able to see where their flaws are at. They're able, whatever you want to call them, but they can see where they need to improve. The morale is better because people realize that they're going to be talked to in a tone and a way that they want to be talked to. They learn you also, there's training pages there that shows you how to train a person. So your employee's going to see, oh, this, they're going to train me in the way I want to be trained. Some are audible, some are hands-on. And by the DISC, you'll know which way they want to do. I've seen productivity increase quite a bit because if you've got a section in there talking about you're a procrastinator, then you can back up. You begin to see that you are procrastinating. You start moving faster and you get things done more productively. So that comes in. And the number one thing it does, it increases the communication between the people and the team building. It makes the company closer.
You know, some of the things that have amazed me since you started doing this, Cheryl, I can remember when we worked with a very large stone company in the Midwest, and I was doing ready to do training for them. And I suggested that they have their entire sales team assessed by DISC. And the amazing thing was you were able to look at that DISC assessment and you were able to pull out who their top performing salesperson was. And whenever you asked, found out you had hit them dead between the eyes. You were able to pick out the people that operated with the highest strengths in certain areas. Do you remember doing that? Can you do that with a lot of company DISC assessments?
You can. The thing is, number one, you see their communication. If a salesman can't communicate, he can't sell. That's just the way it is. I mean, you and I both know people that sell that their vocal presentations are super, their body language, everything, they make connections with the people and they could sell water to a drowning man. And then there's other people that they make their quota, but they don't go that extra step. So yeah, you can see you can see things in the DISC that will point you one way or the other that why they might not be selling.
Yeah. So when you go through this debriefing process and people are learning about themselves, it's like a high D. If you're a high D, which means a lot of times you can alter your style somewhat, such as when you and I went through public speaking. One of the things that I had to learn was, Jerry, you got to take some pauses. You got to give people a time to consider what you're talking about. So are there ways that people can alter and control the bad habits?
Yeah, they are. I mean, you and I both stand on podiums. You and I both look at this camera hours on end sometimes. We had to learn to speak differently because if we spoke at the tone and the speed we do normally or would do, we literally would have nobody viewing whatsoever. So we had to learn to alter theirs. Again, I will tell you, if we get upset or afraid, we will go right back to that person. But yeah, you can alter any of them to fit the situation. I mean, if you're speaking to somebody, you've got to alter yourself to meet their style so you can talk in the language that they want to hear.
Okay. So in the hiring mode, by people using DISC assessment, by understanding the DISC of the applicant or of their workers, can you predict success or failure of this person in the position they're being hired for, such as they're going to be a technician, they're going to be a service tech, they're going to do installations, they're going to be a CSR, they're going to be on the phone, they're going to work in the bookkeeping, they're going to take care of the books. Are you able to predict success or failure in these positions?
You can't always predict it exactly because, again, we said before, people can alter. But what I can see is if I hire somebody, I know what I've got to work with. Let's face it, if I'm going to hire a CSR, customer service rep, they've got to be able to talk. They've got to have a high enough eye that they can speak to someone and not be afraid. But they also need not to be so high that they chatter and they don't get their job done. So I can take almost any of those and train them into the situation they need to be, but at least I know where to start. That's more than the predictability. It's the availability to be able to help them work into a position. But yes, there's some that you can look at and know automatically they won't work.
Okay. So when we started this, what we talked about was the secret sauce. And the secret sauce is being able to listen, being able to determine that other person's behavior patterns to where you can be successful at communication. So from that standpoint, that's the secret sauce. That's how the guy is knocking it out of the park. What he's doing, Cheryl, is he's listened to all the tools. He's become very proficient at the skills of the industry he works in. But more than that, he's able to gauge his presentation style to what the customer needs to hear. So, would you agree that him having, because this particular individual that I was talking to, we actually ran a disc assessment to see where he landed at in that disc. But his secret sauce is he listens. Number two, he speaks with the right tone. He morphs into a person that can communicate effectively with an entire range of behavior patterns. Is that feasible for other people to be able to do that?
Anybody can do it as long as you have the knowledge and you have the desire. You can become a good salesman. Number one, you've got to have the knowledge or you can't sell anything. But if you've got the knowledge, it gives you the confidence. And then if you can take that knowledge and the confidence and portray it to the customer in the way that they understand and the way they deal with, anyone can become a good salesman.
Okay. So, is there anything else you would like to add into today's broadcast that could potentially, possibly help people be more successful utilizing these processes?
Number one, learn to communicate. That's your number one thing. Look at yourself first because till you get yourself where it needs to be, it's hard to show other people what you're doing. Again, like I said earlier, know your product if you're selling product, but mainly know yourself because the main thing in sales is before you can sell anything, you've got to sell yourself. And if you're selling yourself as a product that nobody wants to listen to, you don't have a product to sell.
Gotcha. So again, remember, it's all about developing trust. It's all about developing a relationship and understanding other people, understanding what their fears are. What is their passions? What is their fears? What is their pains? What is their dreams? What is their goals? What is their desires? The more you can understand your customer, the more successful you're going to be. But by the same token, when you have employees, you've got to understand that employee. They are not you. You've got to speak to that person. So is this also a tool that people can use to manage their teams to a higher level, Cheryl?
Or, I mean, let's face it, if this person thinks you really care enough to take the time to explain in the way that they want to, and also just being aware of their when you have said something wrong or in the wrong way, being aware enough to back up and change and bring the person into the conversation. Number one, though, you've got to listen. You've got to know how this person is going to react in a situation.
Yeah. So That's it for today, folks. Remember that free giveaway. It's a free disc assessment, and Cheryl's going to conduct a debriefing with you. To obtain that, all you got to do is like today's presentation. That can be done here on the live or on the replays, and then send an email to Cheryl at cbcsuccessgroup.com. She'll send you the link to take the assessment. Once you take the assessment, then she will take the assessment, review it, and then set up a time to debrief you on the phone call. It could be a very important time for you. It could change your results. It could change your success rates. So with that, we really want to appreciate you being with us here on a Friday afternoon, having lunch with us. We always try to make this beneficial. So watch for the replays, and we do appreciate you joining us this week as always here. We are the CBC Success Group. We have a team of subject matter experts, and what we want to do is help you turn your business dreams into your business realities. And with that, we'll see you next week on another broadcast of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network.